Hello, everybody. I see we have opened up the doors and we are starting to have people come in. I personally am very excited for this talk, which we will get to in a very short order. We have people coming from all over the world here, including our speaker, who might be the farthest away person attending from around the world. So we're going to slowly get started. When we held this live, the first thing we always did was say, who's hiring? And we did that and people stood up and announced they had a job so they could hire people. Well, since that is not feasible the way things are going with the pandemic still, we are going to use the Meetup Slack team to do that. So if you're not already a member of the Slack and you want to give someone a job, go to nyhackr.slack.com and you can join our Slack. You might actually need to go to a different link. Actually, Nicole, is there the link from the web page? I just realized that you might not be able to get in unless you register, and we have a registration link. We will post that registration link in the chat momentarily. You can go there, and there is a channel called Job Postings. And you can go there and post jobs, right? That's simple. Go there and post a job. You want to hire somebody. People are posting all the time. Me personally, my company, since I'm on camera, I get to announce it here. I'm hiring for many roles, whether it is a Shiny developer, a data scientist, an account executive, a Linux administrator, 4 roles. I think they're all posted at landanalytics.com/careers. If not, we have been posting them in the jobs postings on NYHackR. So check those out. As is tradition, we have pizza to start the meetup. This is a vodka slice with pesto sauce drizzled over it from Zazzy's. There's a few of them popping up in the city, and you see some nice charring on the back. They use a gas oven, so I don't expect too much charring. There's some good cheese lock. This slice is a little bit old. It's reheated, but it's good. So Zazzy's from New York. That's Zazzy's, well, from all over the city. There's one on the Lower East Side, one in the Village, and there's a few others. The owner used to work at Keste, so it's a good pedigree there. So anyone else who has gotten pizza, let me know in the chat. Let me know where you got your pizza from. I'd love to hear it. If you're not eating pizza, my first question is why? My second question is, what are you eating? Let us all know in the chat. And if you want to chat, go ahead and do it right here in this chat window or on the Slack, the one Nicole just posted in the chat here. We have a channel called Monthly Meetup Chat. Go in there and talk about this. And speaking of chatting, since we're in this virtual world, we can't exactly all ask questions of our speaker. So throughout the meetup, ask questions either here in Zoom or in the meetup, monthly meetup chat, and I will collate them. And at the end of the talk, I will ask the questions and get them answered for you. So please do either in the Zoom chat or in the Slack chat, ask those questions. And I see we got some answers here. David got pepperoni mushroom from 46th Street Pizza in San Antonio. And Jeff has home-cooked flatbread pepperoni. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Greg has nothing, you're intermittent fasting. Sure. Randy, you got tasty slice from Delizia on the Upper East Side. Very cool. Anyone else has pizza? Let us know before we end the announcements, because we love to share this communal thing. While we wait to see what other pizza people are eating. The videos from the New York R conference last month are up. If you want to see videos from this past conference or all the conferences we've ever put on, you can go to rstats.ai. There's a link on the top for videos, and you can see all the different conferences we've ever put on. Thank you, Nicole, for posting that on there. And speaking of conferences, we just had the successful virtual New York R conference. So in December, we are going to have our 4th annual R in Government conference. We were hoping it would be in person, but COVID still has us down, so it will be virtual as well. This is a conference usually held in Washington, D.C. that focuses on federal, state, local, or international governments, NGOs, and other public sector entities like health boards and schooling and charities. So it's our government and public sector. Those tickets are on sale at rstats.ai/gov, and you can use code NYHackR for a 20% discount, as you can for just about anything we're going to promote to you. So check that out. There's the 4th year we're doing this conference, and we've got a great lineup of really federal, state, local, and public sector, nonprofit speakers, and we have about 10 speakers already lined up, and we have a bunch more we're just confirming that we're going to announce in the next few weeks. There are also workshops on December 8th. We have John Hirsch, who we all know and love, giving a machine learning for public policy workshop, and Alex Bogosian giving a talk about climate change data. Not a talk, sorry, a full day workshop, but how to work with climate change data. So those should be really, really interesting. In addition to the upcoming conference, we have the next 4 months of meetups scheduled. We are super excited. We're this far in advance. It makes our life so much easier. In November, we have JD Long at CMastication on Twitter, giving a talk about joining billions of rows together in SQL joins and R joins and pandas joins. He's going to do some permutation of those languages. I forget exactly which ones, but November 18th, JD Long will be giving a talk, and we will be announcing it in the newsletter soon, maybe even tomorrow or Monday. Then December 1st, the week before the R in Government Conference, David Robinson will be giving the meetup talk, and it will be live coding a Shiny app. We all know D-Rob loves being on the spot doing live coding. So December 1st, come check out D-Rob live coding a Shiny app. January, the date to be determined. We don't have an exact date yet, but sometime in January, I believe mid-January, we will confirm. We have ZJ talking about disk frame. For those of you that don't know, disk frame is a out-of-memory format for R that keeps your data on a file on disk and allows you to use dplyr and data table on that data set. So that's coming in January. Then in February, we have Hans talking about DuckDB. DuckDB is a really popular up-and-coming database format that could be both on disk or in memory and can work with Parquet files. It has bindings in Python, R, I believe Rust, Go, and other languages. It's going to be a really fun talk. That'll be February, the exact date to be determined. After February, we don't know yet. Maybe we'll be back in person, in which case we will live stream it just like we're doing now. Maybe it'll still be virtual. It's going to see how the world goes. We're hoping that we're back in person at some point next year, hopefully earlier in the year, but we'll see. So that's a lot of stuff we just had to digest. We had pizza, we had jobs, we had meetups coming up, we had videos from last month's conference, we have our government conference next in 2 months. And for anyone who wants to see videos from the meetup, you can go to nyhackr.org/presentations.html and search through the very clunky interface to find slideshows and videos. If you think that interface is clunky and you don't like it, change it. I wrote it and it's not good. So please make a pull request. It is a publicly available repo, github.com/nyhackr/nyhackr. Make it better. It's not a high bar. Anything will be better than what I built. So with that, I hope everyone is excited. I personally am super excited for this talk. If I'm not using RStudio, odds are I'm using VS Code. Just no way around it. It's the second most open app on my computer. RStudio and VS Code, always the top two, usually open at the same time. Today, we're going to learn about how to use R inside of VS Code. So you can do all of your own work right in there. So everyone, please welcome, coming from literally halfway around the world, I believe. I have to get a measure to make sure it's the right case, but if not literally, almost exactly halfway around the world, please welcome Kun. And I'm going to give you virtual applause since no one's in the room to clap.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me here. And now I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the screen?
I can.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me here. My name is Kun Ren, and today my topic is using R in VS Code. I'd like to briefly introduce myself a little bit. I'm a hedge fund researcher. I create research framework and tools and do portfolio optimization, high frequency, a lot of data analysis. I mostly use R for research and C++ for efficient implementation of algorithms and production systems. I'm a major collaborator of VS Code R and our language server, which is our today's topic. I also contribute to some other popular packages such as Data Table and Linter and some others. Before we start talking about VS Code, let's step back and take a closer look at RStudio. Actually, it is RStudio server running on a remote Linux machine in this screenshot. I guess it should be the environment most R users are quite familiar with. The user interface of RStudio is quite straightforward. You can see everything you need in one screen: the code editor, the terminal, the global variables in the workspace, and the plots. It's actually quite easy to make things more difficult, and it's difficult to make things easy. I think RStudio does an absolutely amazing job to make data analysis much, much easier. Basically, RStudio provides syntax highlighting for numerous programming languages, of course, R and C++, some Python, and nice code completion for R and some basic completion for C++. It has nice integration for R Markdown, R Notebook, debugging, linting. For version control, it provides some very simple Git support. I've been working with R in VS Code for 2 years, but RStudio is still the standard we're looking at when we consider the features and desired behavior of how we should interact with R in VS Code. The great things I appreciate about RStudio is that it just works out of the box, almost zero configuration. It's intuitive all-in-one screen layout, a nice integration of R packages make RStudio extremely user-friendly and easy to work with. It's quite important to notice the fact that most R users are not professional developers, but researchers and those who need to work with data. The top concern is probably whether the coding environment makes them more productive to solve their problems, rather than how powerful the tool is. It is designed through the lens of a data scientist rather than a software engineer. However, when my work gets more and more complicated, sometimes I find it painful to use the free version of RStudio Server in some scenario. For example, when I need to work with multiple interactive R sessions on one server to run 2 scripts in the same projects at the same time and view the output side by side, it is not easy. If I need to interactively run a script in another project, I have to switch to that project, but it also means I need to either save or drop the workspace of the current project. When the workspace contains some huge data frames, it won't be feasible to do so, as it would take a lot of time to save or restore the workspace. Sometimes I need to work with multiple programming languages. Some of my projects contains a lot of feature generating functions, such as some time series functions. They're implemented in C++ for better performance, but wrapped in R functions for easier programming and analysis with the existing data. But in my cases, I have to work with R and C++ side by side. The C++ support in RStudio is a bit too basic to be productive. Another case is that I might need to write some HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript when I work with Shiny apps, such as live trading dashboard or something. The web development stack is a whole new realm, but they are just supported at a very minimum level in RStudio. Sometimes I need to work with multiple servers. In one scenario, these servers are independent and designed to perform different tasks, but all of them accumulate some data locally. If I need to analyze the data on each server, installing an RStudio server on each of them does not look like the right solution. Another scenario is that I use a HPC cluster and I need to submit jobs to the scheduler. In this case, it's not easy to write the task script since the cluster nodes that run the tasks do not run RStudio server. When the project gets larger, it's getting more and more difficult to maintain. Without more powerful engineering tools, it won't be easy to search by symbol, rename a symbol, or find references to a symbol project-wide. Another important thing in RStudio is that the code editor and the R session are somehow bundled. When the R session is busy, the editor is usually not responsive anymore. When the R session crashes due to some bug in the compiled code, the editor could not survive either. If there are unsafe changes, there's a risk that the code might be lost. This usually happens when we do very heavy parallel computing But the worst case of all, in some cases, the server cannot be accessible through it, could only be accessible through SSH, and sometimes the RStudio server is simply not available at all for network or security reasons. So I encountered all the above scenarios in my work using R, and I started trying to use R in VS Code 2 years ago. Before that, I've been using VS Code to do some C++ development for a few years, and the experience has been constantly improved through time. VS Code is a free open source code editor. The biggest difference between VS Code and RStudio is that VS Code is not specifically designed for certain programming languages. It has built-in support of the language server protocol to enable code editing features such as completion, signature, diagnostics, hover, and go-to definition, and so on, and the debug adapter protocol to allow users to interactively debug any program written in any language as long as there is a supported debugger. It also has built-in support of Git and tons of extensions to improve the editor in different aspects. And VS Code keeps evolving. The support of some of the most popular languages are constantly improved. They support most of the features VS Code has to offer, and the programming experience with these languages is simply awesome. Remote development and live collaboration are two killer features of VS Code. I'll talk about them later. According to a recent developer survey by Stack Overflow, VS Code tops the ranking of the favorite IDEs among all listed editors, including some professional IDEs like Visual Studio. However, the ranking here does not mean that VS Code is magically working well with R. In fact, just 2 years ago, the R support in VS Code was quite basic. Only a small set of features were implemented. From this screenshot, it's easy to find that VS Code is more focused on the code, as the code editor occupies major part of the screen. Besides the code editor are the file explorer and document outline and some little icons to go to see the extensions, to see the Git. It's easy to compare different files or compare different versions back in time of the same file. It's a div view. The most exciting thing about VS Code is that thousands of extensions are available in the VS Code marketplace. You can use whatever makes you more productive. So here is a simple screenshot of working with an R project in VS Code. Now, we have a dedicated workspace viewer, help viewer, package manager, plot viewer, and the reading console. Now the R support in VS Code has become much more powerful than 1 or 2 years ago. We are currently trying to make it easier to get started with. At the moment, we still need to install several extensions and packages to get the full experience. First, obviously, you need to install the VS Code, and you need to install a few R packages, such as language server for code editing features and HTTP-GD for the web-based graphics device we recommend. Then you might need to install a Python and then install reading console, which is much better than the official R terminal. If you need to debug some R code in VS Code, you could also install the R debugger, which is a separate VS Code extension. To have similar experience with RStudio, we need to install some other extensions such as path auto-completion and some other extensions. The reading console is highly recommended to work along with R in VS Code. It supports syntax highlighting, auto-completion, and many other features. The author, Randy Lai, started the R language server project in 2017, and it has been vastly improved in the recent 2 years. The following is a series of demonstration of the code editing features enabled by the R language server. All the features are based on static code analysis. I'll explain what they mean later. Let's take a look at what language features are provided when we edit R code in VS Code. I believe that completion is a very important source of confidence when we write code in not only R, but any programming languages. The R language server provides all sorts of completion while you type. It knows what symbols or functions you define in your code. It knows the function arguments and their documentation. It knows what the objects defined in the built-in functions and objects provided by other packages. It also knows what symbols are available in the scope of the position you're typing. Here, the different variables starting with var are all variables in the function scope, but not outside. You can complete your scope symbols automatically. When you move the cursor to a symbol, it will highlight all the symbols of the same type in the document and the score bar or minimap, so that it is much easier to know the usage of such symbol. When you click one, you can see all the occurrences of this symbol in the document. As you type in the R document, the diagnostics based on Linter is constantly running in the background and mark your code with potential issues. If you install an extension called Arrow Lens, it would directly show the diagnostics results inline with different colors, so the problems are more visible in the code editor. You could also format the whole document according to a standard. The default standard is the tidyverse style. Of course, you could customize the formatting rules in your R profile through language server formatting options. We can also apply range formatting and on-type formatting. When you type a new line or close brackets, you will try to find the proper code block to apply the formatting. When you type a function call, it will show up a function signature, including the function name and its arguments. The documentation of the function appears below the signature. The hover feature is much leveraged to provide more information as we move around our pointer. If you move the pointer to a function call, it will show the function documentation. If you hover on function argument, it will show the description of the specific argument. If you hover on a symbol you define, it will just show the line of code where it is defined. Once you are not sure about where a symbol comes from, you just hover on it and it will immediately tell you the answer. Go-to definition works with functions and symbols in the document and the entire workspace. If it is defined in a file in your workspace, then it jumps straight to the right position of that file. If it is a built-in function or defined in a package, it will create a temporary file and put the function body in it. The underlined paths are recognized as document links to existing files. It's easy to tell which files exist and which don't. If you often work with plots and need to try different colors, the color preview and color picker should be quite helpful here. Symbol navigation could help you move to a symbol you want in the document or across the entire workspace. If you're working with a big project or a package with many files or functions, it will definitely save you a lot of time. The symbol navigation also supports code sections in plain R code and R Markdown documents. You can see the code sections in the outline. You can click the item to jump to a particular code section. The code chunks and code sections could be folded and unfolded to save space in the editor. The find references feature is largely based on go-to definition. When you try to find references of a symbol, let's say X, it finds all symbols of the same name, X, across the entire workspace and finds the definition of each X. All symbols that have the same definition as your X will be treated as the references of the same symbol. It's extremely useful if you want to evaluate the impact when you need to refactor your code and rename some of the symbols across the entire workspace. The rename symbol feature is based on references. It simply finds all the references of a symbol and performs a rename. You can preview the rename and you may refine it as you like. Call hierarchy is a more advanced feature. It is also based on references. You could follow the incoming or outgoing hierarchy of a function. Another interesting feature is selection range. You could expand or shrink your selection based on ranges of the nested expressions. All the code editing features introduced above are implemented according to the so-called language server protocol. When we open an R project in VS Code, the VS Code R extension starts our language client, which then starts a language server. And then when we open, modify, or close a document, type in the editor, or move cursor or pointer around, the language client will send many types of requests to the language server. The language server has to keep track of the latest state of each document, do some parsing and analysis, and respond to each request timely. The LSP, the language server protocol, is an abstraction layer between a specific editor and a specific language. If there's no such protocol, and if the developers of a language want to support another editor, they have to write some new code to support that editor. In this case, if we want all editors to support all languages, then each pair of editor and language will require some adaptive work, which is repetitive and obviously a waste of resources. With language server protocol, each language only needs to implement its language server according to the protocol, and each editor only needs to implement its language client according to the same protocol. Then the language server of a certain language could automatically function across different editors. This mechanism is not just specific to VS Code, but to any editor that supports the language server protocol. In fact, the R language server does not only work with VS Code, but also work with Atom, Sublime Text, Vim, and Emacs. If RStudio someday supports the language server protocol, it should immediately work in a similar way too. Now we have implemented most types of requests defined in the language server protocol. Most of the language features implemented in the language server is based on static code analysis. The R parser parses the document and generates an abstract syntax tree with the type and text range of each element in the tree. We just analyze the tree and extract information according to the request and the position of the cursor. For example, if we detect a number of library calls at the top level in the document, then we know that these packages will be attached at runtime. Then the completion should include the exported objects of these packages. So that's how we populate the completion list. Static analysis have some clear advantages. First, we don't need to run the user code to guess what symbols should be there when we actually run the code. Second, the language server runs in the background and could process requests in parallel. It also means we don't need to start an interactive R session. Therefore, when the user session is simply not started, it's busy, or if it's even crashed, the editor is still functional and responsive. However, using R is not only about editing our code, but also working with R interactively. That's a big part of how our users use R. VS Code R extension is the front end to manage the interactivity between user and R sessions. It starts a language client to communicate with the language server. It also provides some useful commands such as create R terminal, send code to the terminal, need document, and so on. Before R Session Watcher was implemented in December 2019, VS Code R does not really talk to an R session, but simply sends some predefined commands to terminal. The R Session Watcher provides a very simple way to talk to an interactive R session. It is a file-based rather than socket-based communication at the moment, so that the dependency could be minimal. It is quite stable, both locally and under remote development. It enables all features below, from the Workspace Viewer, Data Viewer, Plot Viewer, Browser, Widget Viewer, and even supports a lot of RStudio add-ins. When a new R session is started in VS Code, the session watcher will attach to the new session and show the process ID on the status bar item. And the workspace viewer and session symbol completion and hover will switch to this particular R session. If another session is created, the session watcher will switch to the new session. If you want to attach to an old session, just click the button on the status bar, and the process ID will be changed to the old session. The workspace viewer is like the environment pane in RStudio. It shows the symbols in the global environment. The same information also appears in the completion list, and when you hover on a symbol, which is defined in the current R session, here in the screenshot, we define X and we move our pointer to X. It tells us the structure of X, its type, its length, and some sample values of X. Thanks to the web view feature of VS Code, we could put almost anything in a web view as a tab in the editor group. For example, the view function is replaced by the session watcher so that it will open up a tab to show the data in a data grid. You can reorder the columns or sort, filter, and highlight the rows. If the object being viewed is not a data frame or a matrix, if it is a list, then it is displayed as a foldable nested structure. By default, the plot viewer uses a PNG device. Each top-level user input will trigger the replay of graphics to a PNG file. There are some important limitations of such PNG plot viewer. There's no history. It does not auto-resize with the tab. It only captures the last plot when multiple plots are produced in a top-level expression. Therefore, I strongly recommend HTTP-GD as the plot device. HTTP-GD is an R package that implements an asynchronous HTTP server graphics device for R. It is based on SVG rendering, so its quality is very high. It supports plot history, auto resize with a tab. You can open a plot in external browser and save the plots to multiple formats. You can open as many plot as you like. VS Code R also has native support of HTTP/GD graphics device, so that it is much easier to work with inside VS Code. Besides the static graphics, there are also a number of packages that provides interactive HTML widgets to be shown in the viewer in RStudio. In VS Code, they are simply shown in a viewer tab. You could open as many viewer tabs as you like. Here's a profiling results done by the ProfViz package. Also, a Shiny app is also is shown in a tab. You could also open it in an external browser. Besides all sorts of web views, it is amazing that we also support many RStudio add-ins by providing an emulation layer of the RStudio API package. So you get a very similar experience as you use the add-ins in RStudio. The help viewer looks nice and it's easy to use. You could run a question mark and a function name to open a help page, or you just right click on the function name in the editor and open help. Also, you could open multiple help viewers at the same time or side by side. The R Markdown is supported too in VS Code, but it is still not comparable to the RStudio features. You can run chunks and navigate between chunks. And we also support live preview of our Markdown document. It's been supported very recently. The live preview supports syntax highlighting and rendering math formulas. The demo here is actually recorded with GitHub Copilot enabled. Looks like somebody is guessing what you are going to type in the document. Actually, it is predicting what you are going to type. I'll talk about it later. When the document is ready to render, just click the preview button. Just click the preview button. When the document is saved, the preview will automatically update. You can see the GitHub Copilot is constantly predicting what you are going to type in the editor. Sometimes it is correct, sometimes it's not suggesting what we like. And the document is rendered side by side with the original document. When the document is saved, and the live preview will be updated too. The package management is handy. You can explore or search the packages and their help topics, or install and remove packages with some fuzzy search. The multi-session support is quite important to me personally. In VS Code, you could start multiple terminals in the terminal pane and put them into different uses. If you need persistence, then you might need a tmux or a screen, which provides persistent windows and panes in the terminal. In each pane, you can start an R session or edge-top monitor, or simply watch a folder. The persistence is important if you want everything to be kept in memory even if your editor is closed or killed or crashed. And with in this screencast is we can adjust the layout of the Tmux window as we want. We can put the two R sessions side by side or in another Tmux window. Another VS Code extension is R Debugger. It provides an interactive visual debugger. You can set breakpoints in the editor and launch a debugger session. Whenever a breakpoint is hit, the session is paused. You can look around and see the local variables and the call stack, or simply hover on symbols to view their values. As I mentioned in the beginning, a big proportion of the power of the VS Code comes from its great ecosystem where many extensions are available. These are some of the most used extensions I personally find quite useful. Like, for example, like the VS Code PDF, you can view a PDF file straight in VS Code tab. Some features of VS Code are not specifically designed for a certain language, but could vastly benefit many users in all fields. For example, the real-time collaboration is one of them. 2 or more users could join the live share session of a host. The code editing and running commands in terminal are visible to all users. We also do some adaptation to support the live share API. So the plot viewer, data viewer, and most other viewers provided by VS Code R are also visible to other users. If you use C++ to write efficient algorithms based on RCPP or CPP11 to be used in R, then VS Code can also provide a fully functional development environment for you to write C++ with all the language features immediately available, like auto-completion, go-to definition, file references, code formatting, and many, many other features. With some configuration, debugging the C++ code in an R package based on RCPP or CPP11 is also possible and works nicely. So here is a demo where I'm debugging an RCPP function with a GDB debugger. As you can see, the debugger is visual and interactive. You can run by step into or step out of the call stack and see the local variables and inspect the call stack easily. It's just running a test which calls the RCPP code internally. When the breakpoint is hit, then it's you have the total control of the workflow. If you look carefully of the screencast I just demonstrated, the RCPP debugging is actually running on a remote machine. In May 2019, Microsoft released the remote development extensions for VS Code. It supports connecting to a server via SSH, Windows subsystem for Linux, and Docker containers. So programming on a remote machine is made just like programming locally, and your favorite extensions just works out of the box on the remote server. So as long as you have SSH access to a server, you can use the remote development extensions to work on the server, just like work locally. If you use some Docker containers, you can just attach to the Docker containers easily. A very recent news about VS Code is the GitHub Copilot, just like I have mentioned earlier. It provides a VS Code extension to help you write code in any programming language. As far as I know, it is trained by the public code hosted on GitHub. I've been using it for several months, and it is amazing when you are writing some code that is commonly used or follow a certain pattern. You just check whether the Copilot suggests the desired result and press tab if you accept the suggestion. From all the above examples, we can clearly see that our users could not only benefit from the evolution of the R community, but also enjoy the amazing new tools provided by the VS Code ecosystem. If you would like to try the GitHub Copilot, it's quite interesting. You can sign up for a technical preview, and then you're going to receive some emails from GitHub, and you can try it in VS Code. So that's the talk today. I put the links of the language server, VS Code R, and the debugger projects on GitHub. So if you would like to try them, you can just install GitHub and start trying.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a virtual round of applause because, again, nobody here. We could have some clap emojis in the chat. That'd be great.
Oh, thank you.
And I see one more question I'm going to write down there. Running resources for. Okay, just want to make sure I have all the questions written down in case anyone sticks them in here. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't let me copy and paste the question, so I need to transcribe whatever questions are asked.
Okay.
Look at all those clap emojis. People love this talk. We have multiple emojis.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you probably can't see the chat window. People are loving this. So I will say for everyone, thank you very much for that wonderful talk. And we have a few questions for you. All right. First up, not so much about R, but you said something about there's an extension for showing code errors in line.
Yeah.
Which extension was that?
It's called the arrow lens.
Arrow lens. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, look at that. Some nice good heart Kun. That's cute. Look at all these emojis. People are very happy with this talk. I think people are really excited. I've just seen.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talking more and more about VS Code of R. So that's pretty exciting. A question that just came in. We'll do this one before other ones because I can't copy and paste. Is there any support similar to features for building packages in RStudio where you could clean, rebuild, test the package? Is there anything like that for VS Code?
Yeah, we currently have some built-in commands from the DevTools package, just like install, clean, or load, or something. They are simply, some of the commands are simply sending predefined commands to the terminal. Mm-hmm. So it's not a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, so a lot of the shortcuts in RStudio are just calling R code with keyboard shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not a question, but rather a statement. It says, thank you for all your contributions and making this so easy.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I think it's not so easy at the moment because the hardest thing at the moment is that it is not it's not easy for beginners to get started in VS Code to use R because we have to do some configuration to install a bunch of packages, R packages and VS Code extensions. If you use RStudio, you just open RStudio and everything just ready there. So yeah. I think we have to do some work to make it easier for beginners.
Like, is there a like in VS Code like a meta extension where you can install one extension that installs a bunch of other extensions?
Yes, it's called extension pack.
Oh, right
Yeah,
there
we
might
can
be
do
pretty
it.
useful.
Yes, we can do it at multiple levels. One is that we can create an extension pack which depends on a number of extensions we like. Another way is that we can define a Docker image which contains a full experience of our development environment in VS Code, and they both exist. I think.
Yeah, great. That seems really helpful. So how do you handle, I guess, I saw when you were in the terminal, you had to launch R manually in the terminal. How do you handle multiple versions of R? You just have to be careful which one you launch, or and how do you determine which one gets the R commands? When you had tmux going, you had 2 R sessions. How do you know which one gets the command?
In a tmux, if you use a tmux, and you will highlight the active pane, so you have to distinguish which one is active yourself.
Okay.
You can make it more clear by defining its style to show which one is active. But for different versions, you could obviously, if you have different versions of R installed in your machine, they must be on different path. So you could start your R sessions manually with the different executables on the machine, and if it works properly, it could automatically attach to the active session when you click the status bar item. It will not really care about which version of R you use.
So whichever one's open in your terminal, we'll just use that one.
Yeah.
All right. And there's a setting in the settings for VS Code to set which is the default version of R, correct?
Actually, if you of course you have to install a certain version of R, but any version you like, just meet the minimum requirement of the VS Code R extension.
Okay, cool. When you showed the viewer, using the view function, in our studio it paginates if you have large data, it doesn't do it all at once. How do you handle large data frames in the viewer?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question, and we have a bunch of issues talking about this. Actually, currently we just write all the data being viewed on a JSON file and put it into a data grid to be shown in the web view. But if the data is too large, and it costs a lot of time to write that data, because we have to write the data, and the VS Code R has to load the data, and it could be time consuming when the data is big. But RStudio does an amazing job to support the asynchronous loading of the data. If you scroll down to more lines, more rows, you can load it dynamically. But this mechanism relies on a two-way communication between your editor, or your viewer, and the R session. Currently, our session watcher just implement a very simple file-based communication mechanism. It's even not a very robust two-way communication. It's simply something like a one-way communication. Is when user input something, we just use the task callback to capture the result of the user input, and then we design how to present the result inside VS Code, and it's a one-time evaluation of the results. So if we are going to support the dynamic loading of the data in the viewer, we have to implement some kind of socket communication to let VS Code R and the R session talk in two-way talk.
Okay, yeah, it's probably a big task, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think it could be useful in this sense.
Cool. Yeah, I think that would be, because like people have like a 1,000,000 row data frame. You don't want to serialize that.
Yeah.
Cool. Someone asked a question about how suitable is VS Code for our Markdown workflow? So a lot of people use R Studios, like you have R Markdown, you're rendering it repeatedly, and you did say it's not quite all the way there. So how suitable would you say it is?
No, actually, I'm not a very heavy user of R Markdown, and basically, VS Code R just has some very basic implementation or support for the R Markdown tools. And in R Studio, you can see it is very handy. You can present the results just in line, just below the code chunk, and you can easily insert a chunk, navigate between chunks, and evaluate the code. And you can create a new R Markdown document from a predefined template from some packages. And these parts from creating documents from packages are completely missing at the moment in VS Code. And something like our notebook is not yet implemented in VS Code too. So currently we just have very basic, some code chunk navigation and live rendering of our Markdown, just very basic features for that. But in the future, I think we can do a lot more if there are much more demand on this.
And it's funny you mentioned the notebook inline rendering. I'd say most users of R Markdown don't use that feature. That's more like a Jupyter notebook. They would use R Markdown, just hit Control-Shift-K and render the whole thing each time. So I think you're probably not that far behind from the R Studio experience if you take away the notebook feature, which I'm not sure how much usage it gets.
Yes, if the usage is so simple like that, we already support that.
Wonderful. All right, there's that answer. Similar to our Markdown, how about rendering and viewing Shiny apps and exposing Plumber APIs?
I think that the current support is is exactly the same, same as you use it in a plain R terminal. We don't have a particular support in the editor aspect.
So if someone is writing Shiny code and they assume they create a keyboard shortcut and it calls run app, does it pop up in a pane? Would it pop up in a browser window? Would you have to actually go manually open in a browser?
Yeah, you can bind any key bindings to any command you like to send to the terminal to start and Shiny app or something.
I guess how do they get to the Shiny app once it started is the main question.
Okay, it's just when you start in Shiny app, it just a new web view will be created and it will be automatically reviewed in your editor.
Oh, wait, so the Shiny app would be seen in VS Code?
Yes, of course, it's seen in VS Code.
That's really nice.
And you can open it in external browser if you like.
Oh, that's very similar to Studio. Great. This is a question from me. You talked about using tmux to persist sessions. Our Studio server, that's a feature, it persists sessions automatically. Is that anywhere on the roadmap to persist sessions automatically so we don't need to use tmux?
No, I don't quite understand the question.
Oh, so in our Studio server, if you close down your browser, when you reopen it, it restores where you left off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And right now you showed you could do that with tmux. Is it on the roadmap to have that done automatically so I don't need to run tmux? It just sort of saves my R session somewhere.
Oh yes. Actually, we don't have a roadmap for that because it sounds like a rework of the same thing of tmux.
Yeah, I guess
actually you could use a tmux or screen or anything you like for persistence because it is I think it's it might be it is a needed feature for many R users, but if they're not very familiar with the Linux commands or how to install such things or start such things or customize a tmux, I think it's not very easy to begin with. I think we have to do some work to make it easier, but I have no idea at the moment of how to make persistence much easier.
Yeah,
at the moment.
Tmux, I agree. Tmux is, could be a daunting starting point for a lot of new users. So even experienced
Yeah.
users could be daunting.
Yes.
You showed how to, move panes around and everything. It looked like you just sort of drag and drop the panes. Is there a way
Yeah.
to have it start with 4 panes, like code, terminal, plots, and help just from the beginning?
Yes, I think VS Code has in some prior release it has. I think it has some user could customize the default layout of the VS Code window. I think it exists, but I'm not sure at the moment.
And the real question is, can you do that for different, like for R, I want 4 panes, but for C++, I just want the code. And for another language, that might be asking too much of VS Code.
I think it's possible too, because but I'm not sure. You can customize. I think you can customize the layout for each workspace or something, or globally something. But I'm not sure about that.
Cool.
I can check it out later.
All right. And similar, and there's another editor question. Our studio has a feature where you could pop up like a code editor into like another window, so you could put it on a different monitor. Can you do that with VS Code? Rip one of the code tabs out and put it on a different monitor?
I think it is not supported at the moment.
Okay. Cool. I know that's obviously an editor thing, not a you thing. One question just came in, and I'll get back to our other questions because I see it in there and I had to grab it before it leaves. Is it possible to set up a global linter configuration?
Yes, of course. In the GitHub page, in the README of linter package, it shows that if you put a .linter file to your user home folder, and it is a global linter configuration, and it could be put on in each of your project if you like.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. That was easy. This is not about VS Code, but about the language server. Do you know of an authoritative reference for setting up the language server LSP? I forget what the P stands for, language server protocol, for Emacs.
Yes, Emacs has an implementation of RSP, Emacs RSP or something. It supports at some level most of the RSP features are supported, I think, but in some very tiny aspects, it may behave slightly different from other editors, which due to the technical details of their implementation of the language client. But it actually works. But our language server actually works with VS Code, Atom, and Sublime Text, Vim, Emacs, just as I mentioned in the slides.
Right. This one's not about R, but you mentioned Docker extension in there, and there's a question about every time you run Docker run, you use the command palette to run Docker. Does it spawn a new terminal each time, or can it just work in an existing terminal?
I don't think you could reuse existing terminal. It just it starts a new VS Code window.
Oh, okay. And then related, there's a question. Do you know of any resources for using R inside Docker? Because you mentioned using the remote capabilities of VS Code inside Docker. So people wondering, do you have any resources for getting started there, setting it up?
Actually, I'm not a very frequent user of R in Docker.
Okay.
Just do some search. I know some the R podcast. The author just uses R in Docker very frequently and in VS Code, just like the environment we described. For some reproducible research and reproducible development, something like that.
Cool. All right, that is all the questions I collated. So let's give everyone a minute to see if there's any last minute questions. There's often one person who sneaks in a question right at the end. So give everyone a minute to see if there's another question. while we wait for people, I'll say that we will have this video up on nyhackr.org and which is essentially just a link to YouTube, by the way, in a few days. We'll also try to get the slides posted at nyhackr. How did you make the slides? What did you use? That's a question for me.
My slides.
IO slides?
Okay, I just made my slides in PowerPoint because it's quick.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm a big user of like IO slides and sharing, but like sometimes just PowerPoint is quick and easy. Yep.
Yeah.
And just so everyone has some context here, I asked Kun to speak maybe 3 weeks ago, right? So this is very short notice. He pulled all this together. So a double like applause for like, hey, this talk he did this on 3 weeks notice. So to give everyone like another little emoji clap for being short notice, pulling this together in maybe less than 3 weeks. So thank you for that.
It's really a pleasure for me.
Thank you. I certainly enjoyed it. As I said earlier, this is my second favorite editor, so I'm excited to use it more for my favorite language. R is definitely my favorite language. I'm excited to use it a lot more for that. Oh, one question from me. Have you seen any stand support in VS Code? Stand goes so well with R.
I'm not sure if there's a particular support in VS Code, but I'm sure that it could probably work as expected in VS Code.
Yeah, I think so. Just needs to have some way to do the linting, which I guess is an R package. And there's another question from Andy. So he uses the remote dev extension to get to a PBS node remotely. He has to log into a submission node, then QSub. And then from there, he has to get to a compute node. How do I get VS Code R to work in this setup? I don't know what you're saying, Andy. Kun, do you know? Can you see the question in the chat window?
Yes, of course. Actually, it is a question asked in the issues on GitHub for VS Code R, and actually the session watcher is based on a file-based communication mechanism, and if your compute node if the R extension cannot access the compute node, its file system, then we can't let the session watcher to attach to an interactive session started on the compute node. But it does not mean that we can do nothing about it. Actually, the simplest thing we can do is that we just somehow start an R session on the compute node manually in the VS Code terminal, but the session watcher is not attached, and we keep the code on a remote machine that we have access to via SSH, and the language server should work because it does not rely on a live R session or the interactive R session. The code editing features should be there, but the interactivity like session watcher features might not be available on this setup.
Cool. So I know for me, I was a little lost by the QSub and PBS. Hopefully that meant a lot to Andy and anyone else listening. And your answer triggered another question from me. Your static file, I forget the word you even used, so your static file analysis. Does the code file have to be saved for it to work? Or if I'm like working in a file, working and haven't saved my file for a while, and I define a function, will you see that function?
Okay, you don't need to save the file because when you open a file, save a file, or even modify a file, the language client will send all its content through a language server protocol request to the language server. So as you type in the document, we already know the whole content of the file. So then we can do the parsing and everything else to fulfill the request.
Okay, then the follow-up for me. If I put Roxygen documentation like above the function using a hash, single quote, @param, that stuff, do you pick that up, and can you make a help file, like a help file for my defined function as I type it?
Actually, we capture the Roxygen comments in the hover, but I didn't show it in the slides. if you write some Ruxygen comments above a function, if you hover on the function, then you will show the documentation, just like a standard documentation.
And can you make that show up in like the help window in a pane, or is that too much?
Actually, at the moment, we don't have that support at the moment.
Still pretty cool. You get the Ruxygen in real time. That's awesome. All right, I'm impressed by that. By a lot of the stuff. I'm very impressed by a lot of the stuff you showed. All right, so since I think everyone's had time to ask their questions, I'm just going to very quickly remind everyone, if you're looking for a job, go to the job postings channel in Slack. If you're looking for pizza, I already ate all mine, but email me if you want a pizza rec. I got lots, mostly in New York City, but some other cities too. Videos from the New York R conference were posted at rstats.ai. The R in Government and Public Sector conference is December 8th through 10th. Go to rstats.ai/gov and use discount code NYHackR. November will be JD Long. December will be David Robinson. So JD will be talking about giant joins in SQL and R, maybe Python, I'm not sure. David Robinson will be live coding Shiny app. ZJ will be talking about disk frame, and Hans will be talking about DuckDB. So we have a conference and like 4 more meetups planned already. So we have a lot going. We have the wheels turning on a lot of the stuff. As we go by, I'll send more notifications to everybody, let you know. Follow NYHackR on Twitter, and we'll keep everyone really informed. So I just want to say thank you very much once again to Kun. I really, really, really enjoyed that, and I hope everyone else did too. And I'm going to go practice this stuff. I'm going to go use VS Code R tonight. So everyone, one more time as we head out, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure. If you have any questions, you can just raise new issues or discussions on GitHub.
Yes, please go to GitHub. GitHub's a great place. I love raising issues on GitHub in a constructive manner and helping people and asking questions and helping with features and reporting bugs. And interacting with people on their GitHub issues really shows, in a nice way, really shows that you care about their work. And people love it when you care about their work. So go to GitHub and let Kun know how much you're using his software.
Yes.
All right, great. So everyone with that, enjoy the rest of your night or day. I know Kun, it's very early in the morning for you. So thank you for being here so early, and everyone else around the world, whatever time zone you're in, or in America or elsewhere, go have a great day /night/afternoon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.